When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ledlow, and enjoy today's episode.
Hello, everyone. It's been a while. I had enough podcast dropping for the last 6 months where I've been working on my business, and as you guys all know, you're probably watching the news. It's been a little crazy lately. We'll go into more in detail about that here in a few minutes with John Fisher. John Fisher has been a good friend of the podcast for going back several years. He actually flew. He was on a detail with his principal in Orange County. I think, was it 2 years ago, John?
It seems like it was about that time. I was thinking about it myself, and it was probably 2, if not 3, but somewhere that's close.
So, yeah, it's been a minute, and John's been all over the globe with his principal. And as we go into the show, you'll find out who that principal was. Now, John is now officially retired with board.
Yes.
And so he's finding the private sector to be very interesting, to say the least. But, yeah, here we are. Just it's kind of a crazy couple weeks. I'm sure most of us on the audience would watching the memorial service in Phoenix, Arizona at State Farm Stadium, where the Cardinals play for Charlie Kirk. And thoughts and prayers go with his family and that organization. And this will be a conversation about protection, John Fisher's background with the state of Texas and what he did on that project as a body agent, and we'll jump into that. But thanks for tuning in. And it's been a minute since I've been on the podcast. We had enough in the queue in the last 4 or 5 months, and spinning it back up again, and happy to have John Fisher on the show. So welcome back, John, and looking forward to this intense, deep conversation on the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah. There's so many parallels, as we talked offline yesterday, about how, Trump was in Pennsylvania. He was on the stumps, as they say, rallying, and, we all saw it, dodged a bullet. And yeah, it's just crazy. I'm just trying to process through all this stuff. Trump dodged a bullet, Charlie didn't, and it's like, in our minds we're thinking, okay, why one and why not the other? So I'd like to get your opinion and thoughts on all that.
Absolutely, and the thing with what we do, or what you do and what I did is, they only have to get it right once. We have to get it right all the time. And that's the difficult thing. And it's not becoming complacent and making sure that you have those lines of communication. I have my thoughts and my theories as far as both of them. But there again, I'm not privileged to all of the information and what has come out after the after-action reports, and I'm sure they're still processing on this most recent event. But, through what I've heard, what I've read that has been allowed to me, it goes back to that single thing of that they only have to get it right once. And fortunately with President Trump, they didn't get it right. And unfortunately with Charlie Kirk, they did get it right. And, that's going to change the whole outlook. In my opinion, it's going to change the outlook of how private protection and how we approach outdoor venues with whether it be political figures or high net wealth. It changes the dynamics and the purview of what we do for large events.
So when you say that, did it take a costly mistake of Charlie running his event that, the rooftop suite? For example, when you're with the governor of Texas as a body agent, it wasn't a standard protocol to run aerial support if it was in open arenas where you do a helicopter sweep or some sort of civilian drone sweep on top and make sure everything was clear?
We did if we had the assets available. I know that one of the things is, we would have helicopters in the area. I can go back to one event that we had with President Trump in Montgomery County. It was an outdoor venue. We worked with Secret Service. I was the lead advance and the liaison with service for the governor's detail on that particular event. And they fortunately, because of the cooperation that we have with the local law enforcement and everything, they did kind of put up a TFR, tactical flight restriction area in that, but they did also pop up drones to fly around so that way you could get the bird's eye view. I know that when we were, let's say we had an inauguration, we had cleared those rooftops, and then we also had helicopters above in those areas. But the situation and the event dictates and who the individual is and what resources and assets you have available, in my opinion. I would like to ask you, what can Ledlow Security do in those situations, and how can you provide assistance and support?
Yeah, typically we provide the outer layer of security from being a private entity, because you usually have, the inner circle, excuse me, you will have your state police, probably if it's president or whatever, you have Secret Service, or if it's diplomatic services for a State Department official like Rubio or Hegseth or, Tulsi Gabbard. And then we would probably be hired from the outer ring to provide exterior security around the outer circle. And we can do, we have executive protection agents, tier one, I call it tier one level law enforcement, and, retired law enforcement, and typically your military veterans. And then we can equip them with radios and to be in our gate guards, access control. And then we probably contract out with a company that probably provides drones, and they can just do surveillance. We put private sector drone operator on the outer perimeter to probably run, sweeps before everything on the rooftops, make sure there's nothing perceived to be a threat. Definitely. Thanks for asking.
No, absolutely. And that's one of the differences between being in the government sector and versus the private sector is you have to use a lot of different resources, where with the state police, we had the Texas Rangers, we have a division that strictly deals with drones. We have QRF. We bring in our SWAT team to do react and work with them. Now, granted, working with service is a totally different monster, because everybody has their primary that they're concerned with. And as long as your primary, secondary, and tertiary evac routes don't conflict with each other, then it flows seamlessly in that aspect. You could definitely see during the Trump situation, they had limited resources available. And I know that from my understanding, and I could be wrong, but that the Secret Service did request additional support for those events that were outdoors, but they were denied by the current administration because he was not a seated president at that time. I know that service does provide limited services to previous presidents, and depending on the threat level and so forth. But there was a miscommunication, because I know that they used a lot of local resources there. And to my understanding, Secret Service had inside the perimeter. Anything outside of the perimeter, they could not staff. They could not, they didn't have the manpower to do that. So they relied on local law enforcement. And that may have been a miscommunication amongst them, I don't know. I'm not here to throw stones at anybody regarding that. But it was definitely a learning point in how communication is so invaluable in these situations.
Yeah, because you heard all the skeptics say, get on Facebook feed on some of the security groups that you and I are both in, and all the backseat quarterbacks were also, doing a debrief on how horrible a job some of the agents were doing. And one agent wasn't big enough to even cover Trump's leg. What are they covering? And the lack of professionalism. And everybody was saying, oh, that must be in the JV squad or the B team or something. And of course, now you alluded to the Secret Service policy. So they probably got, the Secret Service reserves, maybe. I don't know. I don't know who those folks were. And everybody was, they covered them immediately. I'll give them props for that. They were on top of them. As soon as things went down, everybody jumped on Trump. So, we all saw that. But, the question is, why I think everybody's general thought is, why isn't in the world, didn't they have drones or helicopters doing sweeps on the rooftop? If that never happened, that never got off. But like you said, Secret Service denied them support because he was not a sitting president.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. And I'm sure that there's through this, like I said, this is going to change open air venues moving forward for private entities and government entities as well. They're going to have to employ, and they're going to have to definitely take consideration as it relates to Charlie Kirk. I don't know. I have absolutely zero idea of what they had in place as far as security measures. One would reasonably think that, yes, they were kind of screening people. They did have people to get them off of the X and that there was some close proximity, but it was at a college campus. And I'm sure it was, they still had to have respect for the campus to be able to be open and accessible and so forth. But there are different protocols and procedures that you can do during that particular event. And they may or may not, I would assume that they had drones in the air, but they weren't in a security capacity. And I think you're going to start seeing that come in much more. And that's where, because I've actually considered getting my drone pilot's license as well in this. And going through the process of getting in, becoming licensed, getting the business license, getting myself licensed. There's a lot involved in it, which but I'm more of a hands-on. I'm not an administrative type person as it relates to that, but there's a lot of assets. So that would be one thing that I would like to, kind of ask you on as far as it's relating on the business side. The time frame, how long it took you, what were your breakthrough moments, I guess you could say?
Yeah, it took probably, I think, 8 months for Texas. Just studying, preparing, even though it was an open book test. That took a long time. And then, the resources to travel to Houston or the testing place to go, drive, hotel, food. That's probably a $4,000 or $5,000 investment in studying time. Even though it was open book test, I haven't been to college in I don't know how many years now, but it was very similar to a college final exam. It wasn't easy. And there's probably, I think, 50 people in that room, and everybody had books that thick. And I just brought my manual. I just brought the thing I studied on, and pink and yellow and blue highlights. And then I had to go back into college study mode. And then I opened that thing up. I'm like, okay, just relax. And then I started marking it up really quick. I'm like, oh, wait, that's not right. That's not right. That's not right. And then I started doing process of elimination. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, by the time I was done, it was 40 minutes into the test. Or 30 minutes into the test. So I'm like, I think I got this thing done. And I went and took it, and they had a scanner right there in Houston. They scanned it. Oh, you passed. Oh. My brain was in shock. I'm like, yeah, you got an 83. I'm like, oh, okay. And then it took probably 2 months after that to go live. As you know, you got yours too. And they want, Texas is, they don't let anybody just come through the door. You got to prove you're insured. You have GL, you have worker comp. I think it's probably stricter than California.
Really?
Yeah.
See, and that was one of the questions that I wanted to ask, because I know for me, it was my law enforcement years that allowed me to be exempt from some of the stuff. But I know here, if you're trying to just break into it, you have to have at least 3 years where you're under somebody who is licensed. So it's kind of like a journeymanship before you can even try and start your own. And for me, it was fairly simple. I mean, I had to wait for the time frame, but you're absolutely right. That test was difficult. It covered a lot of things that it was more of a business test than it was a private security test. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, you're totally on it. Because I had my Oregon license for going on 2 years before I took that test, I was like, okay, because all these tests in all these states are very similar. They ask kind of the same kind of, especially when it comes to business law. Most of the legislative, because folks listening to this, the test is basically the Texas state legislation, laws that they pass that are bills. And that's what you're reading. And it's such dry reading. It's boring. It's so boring. Yeah. And that is what you're being tested on, is state legislative sessions that have been passed by the House and the Senate in Texas or Oregon. And so you start seeing things that are very similar in other states. And that's what I did notice. It was probably 90% business questions and probably 10% labor law questions, and stuff that didn't pertain to exact protection. Some of the stuff was electronic. Something was if you're a key master or, in electronic stuff, like, what is this? And they just want, basically, they just want to make sure you have enough common sense in your head they can read and write and follow the law of Texas. But it wasn't easy. But I think you brought a good point. Most people getting in this industry come from an executive protection background, or they served, like John, you served 14 years with the state of Texas as a protective agent with the governor and First Lady. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I had 22 years of law enforcement, 4 years prior Marine Corps, where I did Secret Service support as a canine handler. And then my last 14 years with the department was on the governor's detail, lieutenant governor's detail, and also supporting visiting dignitaries to Texas.
So you have seen a lot of changes in Texas. I mean, you've seen the growth coming in, seeing oil, gas. I mean, the governor was, always fundraising, and you see who the business people are, and he traveled the world with the governor, doing different things, I'm sure. And, he's the master. He's a businessman too, an attorney, right?
Absolutely. He was a sitting judge, but he's very law driven, but very business, and looks at not only the legal aspects, but what is the impact to the infrastructure within Texas, and bringing the businesses and the incentives and the taxes that are coming in and the revenue that it generates for the state. Because at the end of the day, he's going to want the state to do well. And I'm not going to say that a lot. When you're in that type of a position, you have to keep your personal opinions to yourself. You're out there just doing a job, whether you're on the same political venue or same political ideals or business ideals. You're there to do a job, and that job only. There's nothing personal about it. And when going through the campaigns and seeing, they're kind of naming Austin, or the Central Texas area, the new Silicon Valley, because of everybody that's coming here. I live north about an hour from Austin, and Meta is making a huge storage plant up here. Just east of Austin, over by the airport, Tesla, they're expanding. Elon Musk. And then down south, we've got his, up in McGregor is where they do the testing for SpaceX. But down south in Brownsville on South Padre Island is where they launched the rockets. And that's where they probably sent a lot of stuff up for Starlink. And Google is here, AMD, Intel, Apple has a huge plant here. I'm not sure exactly what it does, but it's all around the Austin area. So, we are growing by leaps and bounds. And up where your office is, by the Plano, Frisco area, just north of Dallas, that area is exploding. Now, Houston will always be gas and oil. There's much technology and stuff that comes in. Houston's going to be the gas and oil with the refineries there on the coastline. Rick Perry just brought in his thing with these smaller nuclear plants and, harnessing solar and nuclear together, that there's a big project that's going to be happening out in West Texas for energy. And so there's always going to be a demand, and, you're going to need, not only are you going to need the perimeter security and the guard standards and contract security. Some of them hire their own, some of them hire out, but you're going to have more opportunity. And it's a very cutthroat business, as you know, when you get into the executive protection. I've had the opportunity to speak with the guys that work with Joe Rogan. There's a gentleman here by the name of Tom Lonsdale that was in the San Francisco area. Kendra Scott, John Paul DeJorio, then there's the McConaughey's and individuals like that. But then there's also, out in West Texas, I know of several billionaires and multimillionaires that they just walk around like it's nothing, because pretty much here in the Texas area, we respect people's rights.
Well, yeah, I think it's part of the culture. It's like, I'm a billionaire and I got a sidearm on, I'm carrying a concealed carry under my my jacket or my shirt. Or I got a rifle in the back of my truck. It's just when I'm out there, it's the culture of, hey, I'm a man, I can defend for myself. And it's like, why do I need security? And I get my own sidearm. It's like, yeah, that's kind of the era that I get when I'm out there. It's the culture.
It really is. And we respect people's privacy. And, it's just a matter of everybody getting along to achieve a common goal and go about your business. Now, granted, we're not without our faults, especially in the more densely populated areas. But there is a growing need in this field. And, with my travels, my biggest learning was when Rick Perry was running for president, and we went from California to New Hampshire to South Carolina to Iowa, and all those. You have to be able to adjust the way you approach people geographically throughout the nation. So when you're traveling, when you're doing protection work in Austin, it's not like you're doing protection work in Des Moines or New York City. Two totally different monsters, and you have to be able to adapt to that and understand what is the climate, how people are in their basic nature. And so that is one of those things. And that's where it comes in to where, for example, Butler, Pennsylvania. You would handle Butler, Pennsylvania, probably pretty close like you would in Utah, but they're different people. Their mindset is different, the way that they approach things. And that was I'm sure it was a very difficult dynamic for Charlie Kirk's group to understand. And in that, and you have to rely on that experience and that knowledge of those that are around to be able to provide a good service. Because at the end of the day, he's out there he's relaying a message from his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And he is just he's not bashing anybody about what they believe in. He's just there defending what he believes in. And he's very articulate and very fact driven. And I mean, you could almost say he's like a Ben Shapiro who knows the facts and is very passionate about it and can have a conversation without resorting to violence and just taking it for what is written down and what the merits stand for and what is behind it and the beliefs that are in it.
Would you say his assassination was politically driven or driven for his faith and his belief?
I think it was more, well, and that's a good question. And I personally, from my knowing of it, it was kind of both. Because of his faith and what he believed in, it aligned with his political beliefs. And so they were kind of one and the same, because the sanctity of life and, just, as far as the Bible, and I don't want to get biblical, but, there's man and woman. It's pretty simple. When you start muddying the waters, that means that you're trying to, in my belief and the way I look at things, when you start trying to muddy the waters, that's because there's some ulterior motive behind it, and that's when you're out doing advanced work and stuff like that, you talk to people about things. And if they're not going to give you a straight answer and they can't answer your question, that would lead a reasonable, prudent person to think, okay, is there some type of an ulterior motive here? Where is it that they're coming from? What's their angle? Or do they just not want to help?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Yeah, you can definitely sense the good and evil forces out there at work. I mean, you don't have to try hard. I mean, you just go on social media and you just see what people are saying on, the different social media platforms, and heck, people are getting fired over it. Now the left saying, "Oh, censorship of freedom of speech." Do they have a point? I don't know. I mean, wishing death on somebody, I mean, that's just not cool.
No, you're absolutely right. And it was kind of like Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, yes, you do have the freedom of speech, but that's mainly as it relates to government. In the private sector, which ABC, Fox News, that is a private sector, and they can fire you at will based off of what you say. That's a good point. At will employee. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Good point. So, and I pick up bits and pieces, and I'm by no means an expert, and I try to be a student in this. Some may refer to as a subject matter expert, but it's constantly evolving and changing. And especially with the introduction of AI and different technologies, weapons, different avenues, you always have to be on your feet and you have to be always learning on this. As it relates to the Charlie Kirk thing, you could definitely see that there was a following. There was mostly supporters there, but it never resulted into violence. Even no matter what anybody said, it didn't resort to violence.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then you hear them chanting USA, USA in the background, college kids. There should be some middle-aged people in there too with their kids. And it was basically it was a fun, little heated debate, but I never saw Charlie Kirk dehumanize anybody or cuss and swear at anybody. He would just lose his cool. Yeah, that's just debating is decorum like that is good. That's where our country needs to be.
Absolutely.
And now I'm thinking, with what just happened, is there going to be a surge of more, even more hate because of the new vision of Turning Point, where they're going to impact college universities around the country, now probably globally. is there going to be more of a threat landscape against Turning Point on the free speech on college campuses to reach out to the college camp kids? Or is there going to be more resistance now from college universities not wanting the liability of what they just saw happen in Utah? So is that going to have to go back to courts, and there's going to be court filings? I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out.
Absolutely. And that's, and you bring up a very good point, because, you're always, there for a while it was, is this politically correct? And Charlie Kirk was able to express without profanity, without anger. He was just reciting facts, whether it be law, whether it be biblical. It's been written down. It's over 2,000 years old. And it was very interesting, and you can learn a lot from that. But if it goes against what you think because of what you've read off of clickbait or social media or influencers, the college campuses, I think they will start to see more voicing of opinions. And I pray to God that it doesn't turn to violence, and it shouldn't. Because you know what? At the end of the day, even in a work environment, such as private protection, there's more than one way. I use the metaphor, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And, there's different approaches that will meet the same result. But that's why it's important in our line of work to sit down afterwards and have an AAR to see what went good, what went bad, and how can we make things better? Because it's going to be constantly evolving in that. And with the number of people that you have, but I think you're going to start seeing even more people show up to these. And I'm of the belief that they will be peaceful up until the point that somebody gets their feelings hurt and they lash out and they don't know how to control those feelings. And you can tell when Charlie Kirk would speak that how he was passionate, and he would harness that and use it in his words and not in his actions. And the way he would use it in his actions, because I saw a clip where a young lady came up and knocked a hat off of his head. And he had, I don't know if it was detail or if it was just employees that were around, but they wanted to, put hands on, go hands on, detain and whatever. And he was like, no, let her be. She has her right to express her feelings. Did she do it the right way? No. But no harm, no foul. I wasn't injured. Let's move on with what we came here to do.